Do you know who the hellish monster we are facing is? It is the very tyrant who became famous among the Turks centuries ago as the Black Devil, Devil Voivoda, Vlad the Impaler. He used to impale thousands of Turkish captives here, drink wine, and dance with his friends amidst their pain. In fact, it was seen many times that he drank wine and danced by making an appetizer of the meat he tore from the wounds of Turkish captives with his teeth. This is how the Ottoman historians described him and what he did. Although his real name was Vlad III, Hungarians called him Tepes, meaning executioner. Romans, his own people, called him Dracula, meaning son of Satan. And Ottomans called him Vlad the Impaler because of what he did. Here is the story of Vlad Dracula, one of the most ruthless rulers in world history, who challenged the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror. Vlad III was born in Wallachia in 1431. However, he could not stay too long in the land of his birth. While he was still a child, he and his brother Radu were left as hostages to the Ottoman Empire by his father Vlad II as a sign of his loyalty. Although these two children were captives, they were treated extremely well, as they were the legal heirs to the throne of Wallachia. So much so that Sultan Murad II did not separate them from his own son and allowed them to grow up together with Prince Mehmed, who would later be known as Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, and to take lessons from the same teachers. Thus, Wallachian princes Vlad and Radu became childhood friends with Prince Mehmed. Some sources take this one step further and even write that Mehmed the Conqueror and Vlad Dracula were blood brothers during these childhood years. When the calendars showed the year 1447, the envoy who came to Edirne Palace gave the news that Wallachia was occupied by Hungarians. Vlad and Radu's father and mother were massacred by Hungarians here, and his cousin Vladislav II, who was loyal to the Hungarians, was put on the throne. Of course, Sultan Murad II could not remain a spectator to these developments. He immediately set out with his army and defeated John Hunyadi, the ruler of the Hungarians, in the Second Battle of Kosovo. Afterwards, he put Vlad III, an 18-year-old man whom he had been training and holding for years, and who was loyal to the Ottomans, on the throne of Wallachia. However, when the Ottoman troops returned to Edirne, the young and immature Vlad III could not hold onto the throne and was soon defeated by the Hungarians and captured. During these years of his captivity, his childhood friend Prince Mehmed ascended to the throne and conquered Istanbul and took the title of conqueror. Vlad III, taking advantage of the disturbances in the region, escaped in 1456 and traveled to Wallachia, where he succeeded in overthrowing his cousin. In order to secure himself against the Hungarians, he immediately wrote a letter to Istanbul's capital city and declared his allegiance to his friend Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror. He even personally brought the annual tax he had to pay to Istanbul for a year or two and met with Mehmed the Conqueror and strengthened their friendship. But what happened after 1459? That year, the Prince of Wallachia did not pay the annual tax. He established close relations with the new king, Matthias Corvinus, who ascended the throne of Hungary, and secretly formed an alliance. Above all, he started to massacre people with ruthless methods, regardless of their enemies or their own people. At the beginning of these massacres, the method was impalement. First, he invited the nobles who he thought betrayed his father to dinner and impaled them all. Then, after feasting all the beggars in his country, he ordered them all to be burned alive. Vlad had brought out the monster he had hidden inside him since his childhood. He especially had a great hatred for the Turks. Mehmed was busy with the conquest of Trabzon at the time. Vlad III took advantage of this, entered the Ottoman borders, and started to plunder, take Turks prisoner, and impale them on stakes. When Mehmed the Conqueror heard what happened, he could not understand this behavior of the man he called his childhood friend and sent a delegation of envoys and asked him to pay the taxes he had not paid for several years and to come to Istanbul and explain what he had done. However, Vlad, the Prince of Wallachia, saw the fact that these envoys did not remove their turbans as a sign of disrespect and had them impaled by driving nails through the turbans of the Ottoman envoys. Finally, Mehmed the Conqueror sent Hamza Bey, an important pasha in the Ottoman Empire, to Wallachia and ordered him to invite Vlad III to Istanbul and to bring him by force if he did not come. In fact, the Sultan had in mind to depose Vlad III and replace him with his brother Radu. He could predict that if the Prince of Wallachia came to Istanbul, he would lose his throne and even his head. For this reason, he captured Hamza Bey with a night raid. And in order to show the rank of Hamza Bey, who was an important Ottoman pasha, he was slaughtered on a stake bigger than any other stake. Mehmed the Conqueror's childhood friend had overstepped his bounds. Mehmed's resentment and anger were so great that he had marched with all his might against a small province like Wallachia. When the calendar showed the year 1462, the Ottoman army, which set out from Istanbul, numbered around 150,000 men. Vlad III had only around 30,000 soldiers. Vlad III, who could not afford to fight in a square battle, started to destroy everything that the Ottoman army could benefit from. He poisoned the water wells, set fire to the fields, and even had his own villagers and animals killed. He applied guerrilla tactics to the Ottoman camp, especially at night, by constantly making hit-and-run attacks. In addition, he gathered all the people with plague and leprosy in Wallachian lands and forced them to mix with Ottoman soldiers in order to infect them. Although this slowed down the Ottoman army, it was not enough to stop it. Vlad III's last gamble was to make a night raid with all his might. On the night of June 17, 1462, Vlad III raided the Ottoman headquarters with all his soldiers. His main aim was not to destroy all Ottoman soldiers, but rather to assassinate Sultan Mehmed II. The Wallachian forces attacked 3 hours after dark, caused panic in Ottoman headquarters at first, but when the battles lasted until 4 a.m., Ottomans overcame initial shock and established superiority, and they managed to repel enemy forces. The Ottomans suffered around 15,000 casualties, but Vlad III had lost almost his entire army together with the deserters. When he had no power to resist, he left his lands and took refuge in Hungary. When Mehmed the Conqueror and his army arrived at Targoveshti Castle, the capital of Wallachia, they found the gates wide open. But the most shocking and blood-curdling event was the forest of impaled people next to the city. The lifeless bodies of more than 20,000 people, including women and children, lay on stakes in a 4-mile-long area next to Targoveshti Castle. It was such a sight that even the janissaries who were accustomed to war and death, some of them could not hold back their tears, and some of them could not stand it and vomited. Sultan Mehmed II, who had lost Vlad III, returned to Istanbul by placing Radu on the throne of Wallachia. Vlad III took refuge in Hungary, where he was captured and imprisoned. 12 years later, with the Kingdom of Hungary and the Ottoman Empire going to war, his life in prison would come to an end. The Hungarians who went to war with the Ottomans released the fearsome warrior they were holding back to the Wallachian lands. The Sultan immediately summoned Mahalalo Ali Bey, one of the greatest raiding beys of all time, and ordered him to pursue Vlad III with 2,000 of his most elite raiders. In the end, Mahalalo Ali Bey completed his work successfully and sent the head of Vlad III to Istanbul within a few months. His severed head was paraded on a stake in Istanbul for days as an example. Then he was buried somewhere in Istanbul. In other words, the head of Vlad III, famous for Count Dracula stories, is still buried somewhere in Istanbul today.